Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we haven't really talked since yesterday. So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first, and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight, taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them, and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over, we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in, and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, "Okay, boomer." Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, "Okay, boomer," to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he co-owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. I sustained very bad injuries to my face this month. I'm in the stage of healing when the scar tissue has formed, but it's still very tender new skin. I'm going to have very obvious facial scarring for the rest of my life. The injury starts about an inch above my hairline, goes down over my brow so that on part, hair will not grow. It continues down my cheek where it is deepest. I'll always probably have an indentation in the fullest part of my cheek. Then it continues to my jawline. In some ways it's okay. I'm happy it's just cosmetic damage. My friends are super reassuring, telling me how badass and sick it's gonna look. They say I'm still as hot as ever, now a little more sexy and mysterious. But in some ways it really sucks. I know that I'm always gonna be seen first as the girl with a scar. And it feels especially bad when people look at me differently. This week, I had to fly home for a family thing. It was a plan I'd made long before my injury. I wasn't really looking forward to the pity or people making a big deal of it. I'd rather it not be acknowledged. I'd also met with my dermatologist who said that I was at the stage of scar tissue formation, that I no longer should be dressing the wounds. The skin was healing and instead I needed to be applying topical cream and Vaseline to keep the site clean and moist. It also looks a bit ugly. The building scar tissue is very red and tender, and with the Vaseline over it, looks slick and shiny. So I get on this flight, I have the window seat and I put on my headphones and drift off to sleep when the plane is still boarding. I wake up to this kid, maybe 4 years old, sat next to me, throwing a tantrum. I didn't catch the first part of it and I honestly couldn't understand what he was yelling about. His father said to me, "Can you cover that injury?" I said that my dermatologist recommends I don't, so no, I don't think I will. He started snapping at me saying, "There is no need to be so rude. That injury is graphic and it's scaring my little one." I said, "This is my face. The only damn face I've got. It sucks being told I'm so ugly I can't show my goddamn face in public." He started to backtrack saying, "Just until it's healed," and I said, "It'll always be with me. Maybe teach some compassion and respect instead of telling a girl half your damn age what you think about her face. That's rude." He actually got up after that and I think went to a stewardess about a seat change because a young couple came to sit next to me on a few minutes instead. I've gotta admit I felt so low that I put on my sunglasses and had a quiet cry for a few minutes. When my daughter was 14, wife and I decided we would buy a car for her to use on her 16th if she proved herself to be responsible, got good grades, etc. There would be a contract of sorts to ensure we were all on the same page. The stipulations were continuing good grades, good attitude, she could only bring one friend with her somewhere, to begin with. We had to know where she was, and the obvious too, don't drink and drive, and don't text and drive. We made it clear that we were buying the car, but it was for her to use. We got the car, a 2012 Honda Civic. She has a summer job right now, it's summer break so she's out doing stuff with her friends, etc. In a few months she will be off to college. Everything was going swimmingly. Until someone on that Nextdoor app started posting pictures and videos of bad drivers in the area. And lo and behold, my daughter was posted with her face down as she texted and rolled through a stop sign. Once with her face down in her phone at a stoplight. I was livid. My wife was the one who showed it to me. We found out there were more instances from her Instagram stories, and we decided, no. Wife and I up and sold the car. We didn't lose very much in the process, except of course our daughter completely came unraveled. It's so unfair, I didn't hurt anyone, everyone's doing it. How am I supposed to get to work? What about when I go to college? Well, we said no, it's not unfair, you hurt us by being a shitty, irresponsible driver. No, not everyone's doing it. You can walk, ride your bike, or take the bus, and as for college, you don't need the car to get to and from classes, and again, ride your bike or walk. She tried to play the "how can you send your daughter to college without her safety in mind?" card, and I said, well, now you're concerned about safety? And she just up and screamed. This has everyone in our life up in arms and divided. Her grandparents think we're being over the top and awful, that grounding her would have sufficed. They've threatened that they will buy her a car again if we try to send her to college without one. The car is already sold, so there's no going back. I think what we did was absolutely correct, that actions have consequences and we would be in the wrong to pull back from that. In terms of her going to college? Well, she made that choice. She had a car, it came with certain stipulations, she disobeyed us, and now she pays the price.